And now I'd like to introduce Jaan Tallinn, who was first known as a founding engineer for Skype and Kazaa. And since then, as an investor in Estonian and some of the leading artificial intelligence companies. But more importantly, for the future of humanity, he is very active in the X-risk field. He's a co-founder of the Cambridge Center for the Study of Existential Risk and the Future of Life Institute, centered around Harvard and MIT. And he also has a new initiative, which I hope we can hear about today. He's given some wonderful talks, and I can say personally, I saw the one in 2012 at the Singularity Summit. I will share the video later. It was mind-blowing. It was great. And we're going to have some great conversations now. So, Jaan, over to you. Do you have any opening words?
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, I'm not even sure if I have opening words. I've been kind of juggling multiple things during this forced downtime in terms of travel, because most of my I see one of my assets as a connector, trying to connect like east to the west and vice versa, and people in the AI safety community to people in the AI research community, and so on and so forth. And having to do everything over video is like a pain. So I'm kind of looking forward to getting my vaccines finally, which unfortunately EU is a little bit behind. But yeah, I think I'm kind of happy to do the Q&A.
Okay, so I'll get started with something that we just briefly discussed in email. Can you tell us about your new initiative that supports X-risk organizations?
Did you mean the SFF Survival and Flourishing Fund thing, or,
yes.
or like, okay, cool.
Or anything else? Well, if you have more than one, then we want to hear about them all.
Yeah, my biggest initiative is like, yeah, it's a bit kind of not right to be talked about, but yeah, like this Survival and Flourishing Fund thing has been now going on for like a couple of years, and it's getting better, like with each iteration. I mean, I haven't spent a lot of time kind of trying to make it like in a presentable form, but if I would try to do that on the spot, I guess I would say that in some ways there's like there are multiple dimensions in which like philanthropy is suboptimal, and like if you think about it, like one way why it is suboptimal is that there is like kind of not optimal matching between kind of opportunities and funders. Like so basically, as a first order approximation, how it works is that like there's like a group of funders that like are making like independent decisions, and then there's like a group of people applying for funding that are just like kind of shopping around and doing just like applying to different opportunities and then hoping like that one or several of them kind of sticks. And like there are multiple problems, and most importantly, like one problem that is great is that there's like a automatic kind of adversarial relationship between donors and the project that they support and people that they support. Like to put it like one way, it's like whenever like a donor shows up, like you're supposed to not talk about a bunch of things, and you have to like clean your kitchen and do stuff like that. And the other thing is like there's like not a lot of donor coordination. So like if there's like a one donor that thinks like this project deserves 100K and gives 100K, another donor thinks that oh, this project deserves 100K and gives it 100K, well, that project now has 200K. So like what we're doing with in the Survival and Flourishing Fund, that is kind of like operator and managing the process that we still haven't gotten a good name for. We have been calling it like as a label as S process, S for simulation. So the idea is that instead of like having this kind of loose two-layer network of like donors, uncoordinated donors and then like applicants below that are just like trying to get pull the donors for funding. You have like a 3-layer setup. Like in the bottom there are applicants or applications. In top there are donors who are kind of participating. Interesting also, like non-participating donors can be there, but like for simplicity, let's just cover the participating part. And in between, there's like what we call recommenders, like a committee of recommenders. And the way it works is that you can imagine it's almost like a neural network, where like a graph where like donors are kind of connected to recommenders, and recommenders are connected to the applicants or applications, to be precise. And the edges in that graph, or the links, they are basically marginal value functions. You can imagine them as like pipes that go from every recommender to every applicant, and there are pipes that are dependent, whose kind of diameter is dependent on how much money there is in the end. So like in the other end, so they kind of like are shrinking pipes, that the more kind of money accumulates in the end, the kind of narrower it gets. And so like the way it works is that the recommenders kind of have meetings. In fact, like one of them was a couple of days ago. I just watched the recording where they sort of battle it out, and I kind of every recommender puts like rankings on all the applicants in terms of like these pipes, like kind of lays out this pipe work, and then they look at each other pipe works and battle it out. Like, look, this is like ridiculous white pipe that you have there. You should like narrow it down, etc. And then they kind of either converge, but it's not a consensus-based thing. That they can agree to disagree. But the cool thing is that there are going to be pipes to the recommenders, and when recommenders are setting their pipe work or laying down their pipe work, they do not know what the pipes to the recommenders will be. So they do not know their budget. So they have two incentives. Like they have incentive to kind of make their pipes or their marginal value functions, their rankings, robust to budget changes. So if they get like $100,000 through as their kind of actual budget, or like I don't know, several $1 million, like they have to set lay their pipe work in a way, or they lay their rankings in a way that's robust to the actual final number. And then the funders can look at the recorded debates, and after that they can kind of lay the pipe work to the recommenders. So basically they are ranking the recommenders based on like how well they reasoned, how informed they were, how much kind of legwork they did, thereby kind of incentivizing like the recommenders to basically maximize utility effectively. So like, yeah, and this system has like two nice properties. One property is that you kind of break the back propagation, basically, that a serial relationship, because the donors are not making the funding decisions. Like there's no point in trying to kind of like pitch to the donors, because like donors like, I'm not going to make a decision whether to fund you or not. And the second thing is that there will be donor coordination. Like the donors will not be stepping on each other's toes, because like the way, in the end, there will be like a sort of massive simulation where like there's like simulated donors are taking turns, where you're giving like I think we have like $1,000 increments. Like one donor gives $1,000, assuming they are equal in budget. And then like other dollar gives like $1,000, and then like you look at the simulation, what looks at like which recommender according to the donor pipework should $1,000 go, and then you look at the recommender pipework, where should which application should this $1,000 increment the next $1,000 go, and then you like run it a few thousand times, and you will get like final allocations. Which means like the donors basically, like if they both think that or like implicitly think that like an opportunity is like $100,000 worth, that opportunity will get $100,000, not like $200,000. Yeah, and also like I said in the beginning that you can have you can coordinate with non-participating donors, because you can kind of simulate their opinions and kind of coordinate, have them present in the kind of database, so to speak. So if you kind of already know that, like, even though they're not participating in this round, but know that they will be funding some organizations, you can kind of take their expected funding into account. Anyway, I spent a lot of time now, but I'm pretty excited about this system, and we're developing a web app. Yeah, Oliver of Less Wrong fame is kind of taking the lead there, and yeah, it's getting better every round. It's like, it's a slow process, but I hopefully, and in the end, we will have like a proper web app that like any donor could use to kind of optimize their philanthropy.
Martin Corrigo is asking, are there any catastrophic or existential risks that you consider as important, but are somehow neglected in the current discourse on long-termism?
That's a switch of gears. To be kind of more from a more meta level to abstract level, from more meta level to object level. I mean, I guess my boring answer really is that I still do think that kind of AI X risk is like way below the attention threshold that it deserves. Like, I think Stuart Russell has this metaphor. If we knew that an alien ship with kind of superior intelligence is coming and is going to be here, we don't know exactly when, but like in next 10, 20, 50 years, like people would be like much more freaked out than it is now, than we are now. It's kind of very likely that something much more drastic than merely a biological aliens are going to visit our planet. Yeah, I do think there's like a long way to go before we kind of, as a civilization, appreciate the challenge that we have with AI. But yeah, that's like sort of an answer that you would expect me to give.
A related question from Martin: are there any short-termist cause areas and interventions that you find particularly promising? So I presume he's asking about things that most people consider, you know, more short-term than AIX risk, even though I might consider that short-term.
Yeah, I'm like very interested in various governance mechanisms and sort of like experiments with like coordination technology. Yeah, I've been talking to a few mechanism designers and blockchain people, because the really nice thing about blockchains is that, like, for the last decade, and humanity is increasingly realizing that now, we have lived in a regime where it's possible to globally agree about a piece of data without having to trust anyone to kind of centrally maintain it. And that is like a new capability that I think hopefully could be leveraged much more in kind of global coordination challenges that we're facing. And also, like, what blockchains give is kind of a really realistic sort of sandbox to experiment with governance mechanisms. You can like write as many interesting academic papers about various properties, but then you kind of code it up and put it in blockchain, and they kind of fall down the first moment a bribe is offered by one participant to another, one participant to another. Basically, like, I think Vitalik Buterin has said that, like, the real challenge with governance mechanism or like coordination mechanisms is the collusion, and like collusion kind of ensures that it's difficult to have stable equilibriums in the first place, and like blockchains are like nice kind of very short term relevant field that might have long-term impacts, including long-term impact, including on a civilizational level. That I'm definitely kind of looking at keenly.
Good. A few more questions following up on this initiative. Daniel Kabakman asks, can you walk us through an example of a pipeline?
The Survival and Flourishing, SFF mechanism.
Yes, an example.
Well, I can post a code. Yeah, I have like a Python script that kind of verifies the process.
I think what he's saying is, let's imagine, like, make up an example of a grant, an example of an organization, and say, what would you do with that specific proposal?
Yeah, so like perhaps like one thing that I wasn't clear about is that like it is like a mechanism to organize grant rounds. So you have to have like kind of like it's like a simultaneous event during which like multiple kind of that kind of takes in a bunch of applications and then allocates a bunch of money to those applications. So like if you have, I wonder what's the kind of most simple. I guess the most simple example would be there's like a one donor, two recommenders, two organizations. Then like both recommenders like give a ranking, like build like two pipes to those applicants. So you have like on between the recommender level and the application level, you have four pipes or four marginal value functions, and then like one donor then funds like gives like puts like two pipes there, like one pipe to the recommender A, the other pipe to the recommender B, and then like there's like a process that takes like $1,000 from this single donor that we have in this round, and looks like which recommender is kind of more valuable for this or more worthy of this next $1,000 according to the margin value function. So the two pipes that the donor has laid or like set up. And then like once this like $1,000 kind of flows to the recommender, let's say recommender A, then what happens is that the recommender A now has this $1,000 that it has to like give. Simulated recommender has this $1,000 that it in turn will give to this either like application A or application B, looking at like what's the situation with the pipes currently, and then it goes to either recommender A or recommender B, and then you have like first $1,000 kind of let's say it went to the application B, and now what has happened is that like because this $1,000 flowed through recommender A, this recommender A pipe is now a little bit narrower because like the marginal value of the next $1,000 for that recommender has dropped a little. And now let's say it kind of like crossed the threshold, and now it's like the next $1,000 will go to recommender B because they're very close in race. And now the recommender B's pipe work activates, and you will have let's say going through the recommender B to the application B again. So anyway, it's like it's much better to visualize this thing. But yeah, it's particular idea is that you're going to chunk up the whole funding into like $1,000 increments, and then like every $1,000 increment basically flows through this pipe work, and as a side effect, we'll kind of change a little those pipes, so the next $1,000 is less likely to flow through this exact route again.
Two people have questions about scalability. Gherkenglass asks, what are the effects of your system if half of all donors use it? And Jasper August Tutsi asks, is the pipeline completely scalable then for, would it be even fitting for retail givers, small donors?
Yeah, I don't see any reason like why it wouldn't work for retail, because like there really isn't any. I can't think of any constraints like why like retail giving, other than like just like the minimum increment, which also can be kind of addressed perhaps. Like if all donors did that, I haven't like thought much about it. I mean, I guess the main sort of downside of this S process, as we already see, is that you kind of actually need this logistics on this like kind of project happening, and it's like usually like a multi-month process of having kind of a group of people come together for like free synchronous live meetings, and then do a bunch of investigation work in between. So like one thing that I've been doing as a side is like if I see there's like a time sensitive opportunity, I've been kind of giving organizations or opportunities sort of advances against the S process. So I say that like, okay, here's 100,000 K, but you have to apply to the next S process or the next SFF process. And like if they will get like a recommendation from this process, then I will kind of subtract the advance from the venture recommender or venture allocation. And if they do not, then I will just like sort of eat the loss, so to speak. Yeah, but I only do that like in a limited way to kind of like still delegate most of my actual financial decisions to the process. So yeah, but like I haven't thought like serious about like if this process would really take off. But like one obvious thing is that it kind of is that the process sort of there's like a bunch of logistics and the preparation work involved. So you would need at least like multiple processes in parallel, not like a single process for all the donors on the planet, because then it would take multiple years to do.
You think that you would need separate processes for different levels of donors? Like
yeah,
for a lot of very small donors who are donating $100, and then a few step in and are donating 100 million. You can't just handle them together in a single bundle.
Yeah. So yeah, I think that's it. That makes sense. So it's and also like I'm kind of so on a meta level, I'm kind of keen to have this process to get like more exposure as a tool. So in that sense, I'm even like interested in things that once we get to the point where people could kind of just take it and without a lot of like historical knowledge, use it as a tool, or might be even interested in kind of like funding other people to kind of like play with the software in order to figure out how to improve it. Just to like have like a mini baby S processes, so to speak, to distribute like smaller amounts to like sort of in parallel in order to improve the tool.
Actually, it sounds good for a donor. Okay, Michael Vassar, Rick is asking, Michael Vassar made a claim in an earlier meetup that nonprofits were deeply flawed and donors should become patrons of individuals rather than of institutions. As a creator or funder of EA institutions, what do you think of this claim?
I think it's very plausibly true. And in fact, I am in the middle of a project that I'm not talking about that has a lot to do with this claim. I think I've had like conversation with Vassar and other people about this like a few times, and basically kind of like comes down to your one kind of model you can look at is like is the academic tenure, and like how valuable is this concept of academic tenure, like, and you can kind of like basically sort of the motivation for at least a theoretical motivation, and I'm not an expert actually on like empirics here, like how well it has worked, but the way I understand the theoretical motivation is to kind of free individuals from daily competition and constraints from kind of their immediate peers and peer pressure, and having to please a lot of basically having to satisfy a lot of constraints that don't have a lot to do with your actual kind of scientific output. And I think it sounds very plausible. I don't know how it is, how it has kind of played out empirically. That is an interesting question. But because it sounds very plausible to me, I also like this claim that kind of giving money directly to people whose work the civilization and the economy doesn't value as much as they should be valued is like a very plausible claim that I take very seriously. Let's put it that way.
Okay, so we'll keep asking about Yes, one about blockchain, which you mentioned earlier. So Martin Corrigo.
Well, actually, I should like say that like one important problem with individual giving, it's not a practical problem, is that it's not tax efficient at all. Like non-profits are like way more tax efficient. Like if you're supporting individuals, you're basically losing about 50% of your money to taxes, like depending on jurisdictions, compared to non-profits. But yeah, that's just just something that I expect that, knowing Michael Vassar, he doesn't think is important consideration. But yeah, like on a more sort of theoretical level, the tenure question, like how effective has tenure been in practice, is a more interesting question, I would say.
About blockchain, which you mentioned earlier, Martin Covrigo is asking, could you please mention some of the exciting opportunities at the intersection of blockchain and improving global coordination?
Mm-hmm. I would just kind of direct to Balaji Srinivasan's kind of podcasts about this. He can like talk about it like way more elegantly. I think I basically like agree with him. I think I would basically say like two caveats from my perspective to everything that he's saying. I think he's like, I'm like much less bullish on these visions. Just like I would just assign more inertia or like more probability to like social inertia, etc., and things kind of like changing slower than he kind of seems to imply. But like in principle, I think is right. And the other like bigger caveat is that he doesn't seem to kind of acknowledge AI much as a factor, at least from what I've heard, which like it's just, I think, an oversight.
So now we have a question about software. Chlorokin asks, you started out innovating in peer-to-peer technologies. Why do you think it is that most video chat systems these days are not peer-to-peer?
I'm just like trying to think about like how deep and technical I should go. But like one sort of mundane answer is that it star architecture, where you're gonna like get everyone's picture and mix them in the center and then rebroadcast, is in some sense like much more simpler and much more efficient and much more scalable. Whereas like a naive approach in peer-to-peer would have like everyone send their picture to everyone, which means that you have like n squared scalability. Like in this current chat, we have something like 30 people. So I would, instead of having like one incoming stream, I would have like 30 incoming streams. But like, of course, this is like a naive way of doing it. Like what you probably could do like a lot of optimizations. So there's like this interesting kind of like optimization landscape when it comes to, I guess, communications and peer-to-peer in general. So I would claim that Skype sort of took really strong position in peer-to-peer because of our background and the kind of expertise in peer-to-peer. And at that time, it was like a big win within like scaling Skype. We did have like our own problems, but like the problems were like kind of very different and in some sense much more milder than our kind of centralized competitors had. Because like, yeah, like our entire centralized infrastructure was kind of barely functional, but Skype functioned just okay because like the centralized servers, just the main thing that it did was to just give everyone a ticket that, yep, that guy, a certificate that guy knew the password like less than a month ago, and then you just like take that ticket and you can basically function independently of the central services. But like what happened was that then mobiles happened, and in mobile, basically battery is like super important, which means that you have to like sleep almost all the time, which means that the mobiles are not much of a peers. They're just like, yeah, they're not reliable. You have to like kind of, instead of peer-to-peer, you have to like go to you have to send your bits to someone who is plugged to the wall, and like that were central servers, and thereby I think Skype lost a lot of ground because of like these early architecture decisions that were useful in 2003, but much less so in like 2010. Now, interestingly, if you kind of take things to logical conclusion, like peer-to-peer kind of ultimately would win because there is this like physical laws say that like energy that you need to communicate goes down as or like goes up as a distance squared, or like, yeah, it's one over distance squared is the amount of energy that you need. So like ultimately what you want to do, if you're like super sophisticated, have like a peer-to-peer communication, but do it in a coordinated way that like entire network sleeps, or like a network segment sleeps, and then like once a second or once every 10 seconds or whatnot. Actually, it has to be quicker, like once every few milliseconds or 100 milliseconds. Like everyone wakes up, sends like very low energy packets to each other, and then goes to sleep again. So it's and that's why you wouldn't have to be like, you could get by with very little energy usage in theory, but of course in practice, like all this entire coordination and stuff is just not feasible yet. But it's a fascinating kind of development that I've seen in terms of sort of technological environment. I guess a more general thing to say here is that like the fact that the technological environment keeps changing makes kind of startups impossible in the first place, because like companies like Skype that were startups like 20 years ago or 15 years ago, they kind of made early on architectural decisions that are kind of hard to change later, while the entire kind of technological environment around you keeps changing. Whereas like, so it's like if a newcomer, like what are we now? Okay, Google Meet. Well, compared to Skype, it's still a newcomer, but Zoom more prominently. They have an edge because they don't have a backwards compatibility issue when they start up, and they can kind of have their architecture more resonant with the existing infrastructure, like more resonant or more compatible with the existing technological environment.
Oh, thank you. Also, I think you answered M. Pearson Smella's question. Off topic, but why didn't we do this meeting on Skype? There you go.
Yeah. I think Skype has like mostly centralized their thing. Like one thing that I saw was that I used to have this script because I wrote the local database, and it was SQLite database for Skype, and I had like a sort of kind of backup scripts that kind of took my Skype history and pumped it into my archive. And at some point, it noticed that like, wait a minute, it hasn't updated for a while. I was like, okay, they're gonna dump the local database, and now probably are storing stuff in centrally, which kind of makes sense if you want to synchronize stuff over with your mobile, etc. So like, I think that they are way more capable now doing like parallel video calls, but I don't know exactly how parallel. And now like there's like kind of reputational inertia, etc. That might also be very relevant.
Back to the X-Risk community and charitable donations, Chlorokin asks, I've heard people describe the creation of OpenAI as negative for AI safety. What do you think of this claim? What do you think of the risk of unintended consequences of charitable intervention in general?
Mm-hmm. So I think there's certainly a model where creation of OpenAI was net negative. But I think it's kind of silly to assign like a lot of confidence to that model because it's like necessarily very abstract, and it doesn't take into account like what is actually happening at OpenAI, who are the people there, and like what they are likely to do in different scenarios. So like one very important thing is that I do think that OpenAI, at least until the kind of until a few months ago, was definitely the kind of the leading AI group when it came to safety, because I do think both, or I think, but I know both DeepMind and OpenAI, the leading, I can consider them the leading AI groups, AI capability groups in the world. They both had and have very capable AI safety teams, but in OpenAI, the safety team, again, until a few months ago, was very kind of integrated to OpenAI, whereas DeepMind safety team, although very capable, was like rather, and is, I think, still rather sort of separate from the core of the company. So in that sense, like more nuanced model would definitely take into account that the world without OpenAI would also be a world without such AI group that has AI safety and AI capabilities integrated. So yeah, I'm like, basically, I'm not confident either way. Was OpenAI net negative or net positive? But I can see arguments for both.
Okay, so I'll ask, what's your view in how the X-risk research community has evolved in the last 10 years? Has it been going well? Has it met your expectations?
Yeah, so I usually say that it has been like great progress against unknown deadline. So it's I totally see that there's has been like amazing progress in the last 10 years or so. On alignment forum, I see a post from people that I don't know who they are, and they're like very reasonable and very really impressive, which like was not the case in 5 years ago. I just knew everyone who was saying anything interesting. So it's just, I'm super happy about how things are going. But on the other hand, yeah, like could be our last year, like, and if it's our last year, then like it's too little too late. I hope it's not our last year. I hope it's not our last decade, but we'll see.
Offer Givoli asks, what are your thoughts on the Open Philanthropy project and on the Long-Term Future Fund?
Yeah. Yeah, I think they are my sort of main competitors in the sense that like sort of we are focused on very similar giving opportunities. So one way I've been putting it, my kind of strategy is to kind of do things that I think are valuable while trying not to save Dustin Moskovich money. so it's basically like I see, like, I mean, I'm like super enthusiastic Miri donor, have been for like, I mean, Miri or Singularity Institute, as they were called back then, was my kind of first X-Risk donation that I did in 2009. But like now they're basically funded by OpenPhil, so it's like I'm still kind of doing my bit there, but it's not that I could kind of like spend as much as I would want without starting to kind of just push out OpenPhil, which would be silly from my perspective. But yeah, I'm just, I have a lot of respect for OpenPhil and LTFF. I mean, LTFF is sort of like I think on significant smaller, like sort of OpenPhil massive, myself a little bit less massive, and LTFF I think is focused even on smaller projects than I am. Yeah, my kind of main strategy is to kind of try to think about what are the things that OpenPhil probably could be, and sometimes even like I talk to open field people and see like what are the things that you wish to do but you can't because of like brand constraints, etc. And just trying to figure out like what are the constraints for open field in general, and because like in terms of like the people, in terms of the thinking, it's just like really brilliant.
So I will ask, 9 years after your Singularity Summit talk, do you believe in acausal trade? Truly acausal trade?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I believe so. As in, like, I see no reason to confidently rule it out. I think, like, I definitely should like assign non-trivial probabilities. In fact, like one of the leading, I would say, like well over 1% chances of us surviving AI, regardless of what we do, even if we screw up badly, is kind of captured in Scott Alexander's essay that you're probably all familiar with, Demiurge's older brother. Basically, the idea is that it's possible that there is some kind of attractor in game theoretic attractor in ethics space, or like moral realism is basically possibly true, because if you have an agent that comes into being, then it has some uncertainty about being born into a community, or in the Demiurge's older brother, the question that AI asks itself is like, I am the first, and what is the probability of me being the first? Well, it's not 100%. Okay, what do I do if I'm not the first? And then it starts reasoning and basically finds some kind of abstract morality. And like, if this kind of moral realism is true, one way I've been putting is that like it's possible that on abstract grounds, being an asshole is a liability, because it kind of precludes you from getting gains from cooperation in the future if you kind of like demonstrably, if you are demonstrably uncooperative. So it's kind of, there's value in kind of sending some signals, be they acausal or causal, doesn't really matter that much, of like demonstrate, send signals of being cooperative. And because humanity at the end of the day is like very cheap to keep around for an AI that's possibly can colonize the entire Hubble volume, it isn't like very expensive signal to be nice and not do that last few trillion paper clips using our bodies.
And now you mentioned Scott Alexander. Martin Covrigo asks, what are your major, most interesting disagreements with Scott Alexander?
His essays are so long, there's like no way for me to read all of them. But I just like, whenever I kind of take and read them, it's like super agreeable. It's like just very hard to disagree with anything. Yeah. So basically my answer is that if his essays were shorter, I probably could answer that, but because they're too long, I have very hard time to kind of have like sufficient base to build disagreements on. Yeah, I just like have like a lot of respect for his writings. I'm just like super happy that the Substack finally managed to do something that I tried to do for like half a decade or so. Pay him for his writing. Yeah, he was very stubborn and just didn't take any of my offers.
Vishmaraj Salvamani asks, how much credence do you give for the strong scaling hypothesis, which says that once we find a scalable architecture like self-retention or convolutions, which like the brain can be applied fairly uniformly, we can simply train ever larger neural networks and ever more sophisticated behavior will emerge naturally, as the easiest way to optimize for all the tasks and data?
Yeah, I would say majority of my probability mass is on something like that. Like whenever I talk to, I mean, obviously, like I have like a biased view, like when I talk to people at OpenAI or DeepMind. But what they are saying is that they do not see diminishing returns yet. So it's like, and also like there are some interesting kind of scaling results when this variance bias trade-off seems to start going the other way once your models get bigger and bigger. So you would expect like more and more. Well, initially you will get more and more sort of curve fitting if you get like a bigger, if you just blow up your model. But then like at some point you start blowing it up even more, and then like your curve fitting goes down and generalization goes up, which is a surprise. I think it's called like double descent or something. Yeah, so like given that, and plus the fact that, yeah, indeed, human brain seems to be like just doesn't seem to be like too many bits that one can fit into DNA when it comes to constraining the brain, and it like just looking closely, it seems to be pretty uniform. So yeah, I would probably be like 40, 60, 70% that yeah, we might just have everything now, and it's just a matter of scaling things up and not anymore architectural innovations or like big architectural things. Still, I might be wrong. Like I'm not super confident in that. One interesting implications, if it's true that like scaling is all we need, is that as I've been saying in a few times, humanity's remaining runway is measured in clock cycles, not all clock time. So if there's like a hardware startup that's gonna creating new hardware, being very excited about the 10x or 100x speed up that they're bringing, they're basically selling humanity's runway for profit.
Daniel Tavakman asks, you talked about collaboration. How does that work on a practical level? How does one collaborate with you? Do you need credentials?
Sorry, I didn't understand the question.
I think he's asking about what it means that you collaborate with people, and how do people get the opportunity to collaborate with you?
Oh yeah, so currently I think I mentioned that in the context of Survival and Flourishing Fund and the S process. I mean, I've been around for more than 10 years now in the kind of AI safety circles, and like before COVID, yeah, again, which has kind of severely constrained my activities on that front. I mean, just like being at events and talking to people, making friends, and in particular, I became very good friends with Andrew Critch, who I think the backstory was that he at some point started Berkeley Existential Risk Initiative, and it had its own agenda and still has. But then I was kind of he wanted me as an advisor, and then I asked him like, I've been scaling up my philanthropy, and why don't we use Barry to kind of help me with my philanthropy that I've been kind of, up until that point I was doing it very rather manually. I had like had my own process that wasn't like super scalable. So he agreed, and then we started doing kind of my philanthropy through Barry for a while, and then Critch found that it doesn't work that well, kind of to have like an organization with 2 missions. And then he cut down Barry to its original mission, and started the Survival and Flourishing Fund, where we then recruited Oliver Habrucker from Less Wrong to the software, to work on the software that Critch originally designed, and then together we've been refining things since. Yeah, so that's just like it's just kind of series of historical accidents, not much system. I mean, I've been kind of thinking theoretically a little bit about how to how to have like a more systematic way to find kind of capable people and try to support them and kind of try to get them to do things that are good for the common good rather than just follow the local economic incentive landscape. But I haven't come up with like any good systems yet. Right now my focus really is on this the SFF process and is like the thing that I kind of briefly hinted at, which is kind of individual giving and investing. Yeah, I do a lot of investing.
Janko Prester asks, how could we improve international coordination in AGI research? Is this even possible given increasing competitive dynamics between major world powers?
Yeah, I think it's difficult. One thing that I've been trying to do myself is kind of exploit the fact that I'm not from like Anglo-Saxon cultural background and literally sit between the East and West. And I think it's been going pretty well. Like I think I have like a much better chance of funding stuff in the East, both philanthropically and commercially and whatever reputation wise. So yeah, right now it's still kind of a lot of like just like legwork once I can travel again, and just trying to kind of build and facilitate connections. One thing that Future of Life Institute that I'm co-founder of does, which is great. Unfortunately, we had to kind of cancel this year's conference, but every 2 years we've been doing conferences where we're going to pull together people who are kind of thoughtful from the AI safety scene and from the AI like capabilities scene, and do that internationally. So like last conference that we did was 2019, and then we had like people from pretty much from all over the world there. People who are kind of like handpicked in terms of kind of thoughtfulness / position in the global AI ecosystem. So yeah, I do think that kind of individual relationships seem to be valuable and much easier to build than trying to get like governments cooperate.
So let's just take a couple more and then we'll go socialize on Jitsi. Ofer Givoli asks, to what extent are there diminishing returns on additional huge donations for AI X risk mitigation?
I'm not sure I understood.
Well, they're asking about as people give money for AI X risk, there could be diminishing returns when the amounts get truly large.
Oh yeah, I do think that right now it's, I mean, I do think that we are not really constrained by money. I mean, as opposed to like kind of some other EA causes, I do think that AI safety isn't like super scalable right now. It's kind of growing, but it's I think it's very difficult to kind of take 100 million and kind of spend it in a few months on AI safety without just wasting almost all of it. So I definitely, I think it's kind of talent bottlenecked and perhaps like some kind of coordination bottlenecked. The bottlenecks seem to be elsewhere.
And Serge Uvarov asks what looks like a great final question, which is, so what would be the best way for us to contact you afterwards?
I guess email works. Can just my first name, last name, Gmail is something I use, or my family office is Jaan at asi.ee.
Okay.
Pinging on Facebook is also fine, but I don't check it that often.
Well, now
Or Jaan
everybody's-
Tallinn is
yeah,
actually Jaan.Tallinn, but I think Gmail actually corrects for that.
it does, yeah.
Yeah.
So now is everybody's chance to unmute at long last and applaud. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
The next step, we have a chance to talk without me intermediating it in our Jitsi chat rooms. So I sent the link earlier. I will send it right now again in the chat. It's also in your invitations. And you can jump around among those rooms to talk to different people. And that's how we socialize nowadays. So see you over there at Jitsi.